Um,
Yes.
all right, before I share my screen, I see a couple of people with their hands up. Does anybody need some assistance with anything?
I put a hand up in the beginning. I'm Caroline, because I didn't think you'd hear me, but it's fine
Oh,
now.
okay.
So.
All right, just making sure. All right, well, I'm going to share my screen and give everybody a brief introduction, and then I will turn it over to our speaker for the day. All right, hopefully everyone can see my screen. As people continue to trickle in, feel free to drop in the chat where you're joining us from. I'm really excited to have everyone. If this is your first time joining us, I'm going to just share briefly about Aparo. We'll talk about a few of our services really quickly before we turn it over to our main event here. So today we are having our webinar on Microsoft Excel Essentials for Nonprofits. This is a two-part series. So Mark is going to walk us through this first part today, and then we'll get a little more advanced in the next session. My name is Brenna Kincaid, and I work at Aparo on the programs team, and I'm covering for Yinting Liu, who is our education lead here at Aparo. So you'll be seeing Yinting at the next webinar. Couple of housekeeping things. Please note that the session will be recorded. I've already started it. And we will be sure that you receive the recording as well as this slide deck and Mark's slide deck as well. We do have previous webinar recordings. We offer these educational webinars for free, so there's a link there if you would like to access any of our previous recordings. As I want to also bring people's attention to the chat box versus the Q&A box. Because we have a bigger group today, if you have comments, please drop them in the chat. I'll be monitoring that. But if you have questions, please put them in the Q&A box. You can also upvote questions there, and that will allow for Mark to get to as many questions as possible. So please put any questions in that Q&A box, and that will help us keep organized for today. If you are not familiar with Aparo, we are a nonprofit ourselves, and we are a capacity building nonprofit. So we exist to help other nonprofits sort of be able to build capacity, up level, and achieve their mission with the support of technology expertise and business process support. So we do that through three main ways. Through today, our education. So this is an example of one of the services we offer through our education. We also provide one-on-one mentoring through expert advice. We call it our tech therapy sessions. And we also provide tailored solutions. So these are sort of more long-term engagements to really customize what your organization might need. That will include projects, which is my role, as well as some of our longer-term programs, which I'm going to mention in just a moment. A couple of services we just want to highlight before we transition is we have a website user experience evaluation. So this is available to anybody, regardless of where you are in the country. This is an opportunity to have a skilled volunteer review your website. They'll evaluate it from the perspective of a donor, of a volunteer, and a client, and then we'll have a readout together to talk about how you could potentially improve your website. So this is a great experience. If you're interested in something like this, you'll have this link available when we send the slide decks, and we would love to have you join for that. For any nonprofits joining us in the Charlotte area, we also have our GAIN cohort program, our next round of it coming up soon. So if you are in the Charlotte area, I do encourage you to apply to our one-year nonprofit accelerator. It includes a $5,000 grant and 5 laptops and technology improvements over the course of the year. You can learn more about the requirements for it, and the application deadline is coming up on September 9th. You can also stay connected to us and keep up to date for these services and that we offer by going ahead and subscribing to our mailing list. So we'd love to have you just stay in the loop and see how we can support you. All right, I am going to turn it over now and check in on the chat because I can see people are joining from that. Mark, if you would like to take over and share your screen.
Okay. I think I just want to make sure you can see my screen here with my slide deck. All right, perfect. Good afternoon, everyone. My name's Mike Halsema. I'm thrilled to be here with you today to explore how Excel can be a powerful tool for organizing and optimizing your organization's data. I'm deeply passionate about helping people harness the power of data to drive meaningful improvements in their organization. My journey with data began in healthcare IT, where I worked extensively with electronic health records. Having started my career in an era before that with paper medical charts, I was fortunate to be part of the transformative shift to digital records, an innovation that revolutionized healthcare as we know it. The transition allowed us to collect vast amounts of data, which holds the potential to significantly enhance the health and well-being of our communities. Just like data transformed healthcare, I believe it's also a game changer for the nonprofit organizations that you all know. By leveraging data effectively, you can make informed decisions not only to advance your goals, but to have a positive impact on your community. Today, my aim is to guide you through the process of collecting data, refining it to unlock visible insights for your organization. In our session next week, we'll dive deeper into some exciting Excel tools that will enable you to perform calculations and create visualizations that truly bring your data to life. I have built in time at the end of the session to allow for questions. As Brenna mentioned, please put any questions you have in the Q&A chat window, and we will get to those at the end. Okay, so let's start with our agenda. Today, our agenda includes a deep dive into effective data collection strategies. Then we'll move on to an overview of Excel that explores some powerful features that it offers. I'll then walk you through a few simple formulas along with some tips and tricks to help make Excel work efficiently for your needs. So to help with this, I created two completely fictional nonprofit organizations here in the Charlotte area. These are really to help us be able to contextualize and have relevant data as we go through Excel. The first program is a food bank that collects and delivers food to those in need, relying heavily on the support of dedicated volunteers. The second is a tutoring program that focuses on middle school students who are struggling with math. While the primary goal of the program is to improve grades and end of grade test scores, they are also interested in tracking whether the tutoring in math has a positive impact on the other subjects as well. So thinking about data collection, it is essential to think about data selection rather than jumping right into the data collection. Data, in essence, is a vehicle that drives us towards the answer and the insights. Therefore, before gathering the data, it's crucial to understand the questions we want answered, both now and in the future. So we do this by starting by clearly defining the questions that are most relevant to our objectives. Consider not only the immediate questions that you have, but also potential questions that might arise as your project evolves. By doing so, you ensure that the data you collect is both relevant and comprehensive. Once you have a clear understanding of the questions you want to address, you can then identify the specific types of data that will be most useful. This approach ensures that your data collection efforts are purposeful, targeted, and aligned with your overall goals, ultimately leading to more meaningful insights and better decision making. There's also a very good idea to think about the questions you might have in the future and consider how you might get that data. Should you start collecting the data now? Will you be able to go back to get the data later? If so, where might you get the data from? And will it fit and will it fit in with the data that you have already? And we'll talk about that a little bit more as we go along. All right, so what do we want to know? So let's go through our food bank first. What information might we want? What answers might we want to have? All right, so the first question is, where do my volunteers come from? What zip codes do they live in, right? Are they coming in on their own? Or are they coming in with work, church, or other civic organizations? How often does somebody come? And this is a very modern question. Do they come more often when they're reminded via social media or email? Like, so if they're following my nonprofit on Instagram or Facebook, are they reminded more often of it, and do they come more often? And so for the middle school, and again, we're really focusing on improving grades. So the first question is obviously, does it improve the math grade? Does it work better at some schools than others? Really to find maybe other factors that help with this. Does it improve overall grades? Just a focus on helping the kid focus on their math scores, does that improve other scores? And do certain tutors have better outcomes? And then I think that helps you deep dive into whether they're using different techniques, right? All right, so then now that we have identified these questions, how are we going to answer these questions? So for the volunteers, we're going to use demographic data. We're going to collect, get a good name, address, phone number, all that. And so then we'll be able to use that demographic data to determine the numbers of where they come from, where they live. Same thing with tracking whether they're coming on their own or not. I've set up a visitor sign-in log. So basically, each time you sign in, it asks you who you're here with, and then you collect that data. And then we can use that data to do some cool stuff with it. How often do they come? Again, you're going to track that by individual people signing on the log. And then do they come more often when they're reminded via social media and email? So we're really just going to track that on the demographic data, sort of a check whether or not they're following us on Instagram, Facebook, or whatever, and then tracking who we send email to, keeping a log of everybody you send emails to remind them what you got going on with the program. So for the middle school, does the program improve the grade? So that's pretty easy. That's pretty straightforward. We can get the last year's math grade and then the most recent math grades after the tutoring had started. Is it better at some schools than others? So this is going to be really a comparison. So we're going to take what we got with the math grades, and then we're going to make sure we have the schools, and then we can break that down by school and see the average student improvement in the school. We can compare the old grades and the other subjects with the new grades, and then similar to the schools, we're going to do the same sort of analysis with the schools, with the tutors as we did with the schools, just to see if there's certain tutors who are working better with folks than others. All right, so now I am going to switch over to Excel here. Bear with me just a second. And I'm going to use my food bank data set here. And so what you should see up on my screen now is just an Excel document. So let's take a quick tour of Excel before we begin. So Excel is organized in what we call rows and columns. So the rows are the vertical bars here. They're labeled A, B, C, D, etc. I'm sorry, the columns. I think I just said rows. The columns are the vertical structures here. And then the marked with A, B, C, and D. And those are typically called, the columns are typically called, labeled as categories. So in a record, a row is a record, and then
I'm in a training. It's okay. It's super easy. What's up?
And we'll wait for that person to go on mute. Okay.
Cases.
Cool.
Yeah.
So again, the column columns are the individual categories. So you see that you have date, vendor number, organization, hours worked, and places worked. And then the rows are the individual records, and the rows go across, and they're typically marked with a number. So
Mike?
each cell, when I talk
Mike?
about a cell, that's the rectangle that's correlated with the column and the row. So here you see we're in A2. If we click over here, we'll be
Mike?
9. Yes.
Could you, I had a couple people request, could you enlarge a little bit to zoom in for folks?
Yeah, absolutely. That's perfect. Thank you. Hopefully, let me get it to where we see everything. Hopefully that's a little bit better. Maybe
Yes,
Good.
yeah.
Yes, thank
Mind.
want to make sure I got everything there. And then that brings up a good point. So down here, just above the clock, there is a zoomer that you can use to zoom in, zoom out on Excel. That's the same thing as in Word. It's always a good thing to know. Okay, so we've gone through the columns, rows, and cells. Another thing that's unique to Excel is these tabs down at the bottom, and they're called sheets. So I have different data for each sheet, and I'll zoom these in when I go over to them. But each sheet, they're independent data sets, but they can be connected. And we'll talk about how to connect those next week. But if you're familiar with databases or any language around a database, these, like in a data, if this was a database, these would be called tables. Each sheet would be called a table. So that's good to know. So I want to go run through our tabs here. So in the tabs, just like in Word or PowerPoint or anything else, they're really options that we have to be able to do different activities in Excel. Now, a lot of these options can be found in if you right click, but you'll always be able to find them up here at the top. And we'll go through the home tab a little more detail in a few minutes, but you have a way to sort of paint the cell. You can center the data in the cell. You can merge. There's conditional formatting. We'll go over that in detail here in a little bit. Insert and delete and format. We'll go over that, and then sort and filter. So the home tab has the most used activities. And then the next tab is the insert tab. You can insert a pivot table. We'll talk in detail about pivot tables next week. You can insert a picture. You can insert a visualization. We'll talk about that in detail next week. These are graphs, bar graphs, line graphs, things like that. If you want to put a text box to make to mark something to make it look fancy, if it's for more of a presentation purpose, you can put a text box in there. You can do some word art and stuff like that. The page layout is mostly just the orientation and things like that, look and feel. If you want to change some background colors, you can do that there. The formulas is a really important part of Excel. These formulas listed here, this is where you can choose the sum or average, max count. Most people don't actually come over to the formulas tab. They just enter it. They'll just know what they're looking for. They'll look up the formula. But if you wanted to look up the formula and understand what to do with those, you can go here to the formulas tab and find those. And then the data, if you wanted to import some data, you can use the get data field. These are all different ways to import data. If you wanted to, I use the filter a lot. I actually use that from the home screen, but you have it here on the data tab. One I use quite a bit, and I'll talk about this in detail here in just a few minutes, is data validation. That allows you to select like a drop-down list. I have a good example of that. I'll show you how to create a drop-down list so that you decrease like misspellings and weird abbreviations and things like that. There's some really a little advanced for this conversation, but some really good what-if analysis you can do and doing some forecasting and things like that. The review tab is not one I use a lot. It's spell check and things like that. It's really similar to the review tab in Word. And then the view, the only thing I use the view tab for much here, and I use it probably in almost every spreadsheet that I start. I like to freeze the top row. Freeze top row. What that does, as you can see, it makes it so that my top row stays in place. And so when I'm working all the way down here, I still know what my headers are. And that's important. Sometimes things can look similar or you can get lost. So I really, that's an option I use on almost every spreadsheet I go into. Automate, again, that's a little more advanced than what we're talking about today, but there's some automation that you can do to set up some stuff and things like that. Let's go back to the home tab. I wanted to show you a couple of quick things. So let me zoom this in for us so we can see a little bit better. So and let me just catch up on notes. Okay, so on the home tab, one of the things that you'll see most people do, this is something that very many people do in Excel, is when they're going through some data and they need to mark certain data as certain things, we have this paint box. So this paint box can go here, you can highlight a whole row and paint it. And so if I was going through this data and I just needed to keep some stuff in my head, I might say, yellow is something that I might want to go back and look at. Red is something I really need to go back and look at. And green, I know is good to go. Okay, so I really like that paint function. That's something I use probably a couple times a day, just to help me sort of keep in mind of what data I've already gone through and what I need to look at. The another thing that's an option here. It's also an option. You can find the option under the right click button, but it's a wrap text. So let's say that we have this sort of small box for whatever reason, so we can see everything on the screen. We want to make this tiny. We can go here to wrap text, and then wrap text, and you see that it puts it down at the bottom. So instead of having it run off the end of the cell where you can't read it, if you click wrap text, you'll be able to see everything you want to see. Another thing that I like to use a lot, if you come in some data and you're like, hey, I don't know whether or not this is, I have any duplicates in here or not, and I don't feel like going, there's like 50 things on this page, I don't feel like going through that. A tool that I use all the time for that is this conditional formatting. So I highlight the cell that I'm concerned about that I have some duplicates on, and I say highlight cell rules, and I say duplicate values. And what that did, it just turned everything pink that is a duplicate value. So now I know, oh man, there's two places called Central Association. There's at least two places called Liberty Corporation and things like that. And so now that I have that, what I'm going to do is turn on a filter. So I go up here to the sort and filter, and I click filter button. And then now, if I wanted to, I can filter this in all sorts of ways, but now I can filter by color. And so now I see all the duplicates here. And so now I know if I'm doing some analysis on this data, be like, man, somehow we entered Faith Temple twice as a neighborhood organization. Then let me show you this. The other thing I can do to help me read this a little bit better, I can sort this A to Z. So now I have everything in alphabetical order. So now all the duplicates are side by side. And so look at this, Central Alliance and is listed twice, is listed as a business once on a neighborhood organization. That tells me if I'm doing this analysis, I need to figure out whether those are two different places or if those are, or somehow we listed as business one time and a neighborhood organization one time. So that's a quick and easy way to get down to that. Bear with me just 1 second. I just want to catch up in my notes here and make sure I'm covering everything I plan to cover.
Mike, someone had a question about the version of Excel that you're using. Because sometimes the formulas can differ. Just if you could clarify which one you're using.
Let me get back to you while we're doing some Q&A. I'll look and I'll write that down. but I'm using I'm sure I'm on the most current version. I'm using Microsoft 365, so they keep that pretty current. In the old days with Microsoft, you'd have to buy it, and it would and then you buy the version and it wouldn't update, and you'd be on sort of an old version. But nowadays, and I guess it's possible to still be using that, but for the last 5 or 6 years, Microsoft has been on this 365 thing where you really lease it, you pay a monthly rate for it, and then it updates automatically for you. So I would be surprised if anybody's on an older version, but I'll be able to double check to see what version I'm on. All right, and so the other thing that I use quite frequently, and we'll go over here to our volunteer list. And let's say I'm looking for, I know I have somebody with the last name of King. And so here is this find function. You can also use Control F to pull this up, but this is something I use all the time. I know there's somebody named King. I just need to find their phone number. I can just type in King. Oh, look at that. It jumped right to Jacob King. And now I'm able to hop over here and grab his phone number. So the find function is really a great function to have for you. One of the things I wanted to show you was this replace function. So for my data, I'm going to hop over to my math tutoring data set. And so so you see on my volunteer log, I have organization 10, organization 29 listed here. For something we're going to do later, we really just want to have the number. So what I wanted to show you was this really cool function that is called replace. So if I wanted to go through that, really my other option would be just to go through all of these and delete them. And I think I have like 200 rows. That would just take me far too long. So I don't want to do it that way. I want to get Excel to work for me. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to highlight row C. I'm going to come over here and I'm going to go to replace. And I'm going to find organization, and I'm going to put a space behind it. And so what that's going to do is it's going to delete organization and the space behind it. And it's going to replace it. I'm going to have it replaced with nothing. So the reason to replace with nothing is it'll basically blank out organization and space and leave me only with my number. So if I just hit replace, sometimes it's a little tricky. We'll just copy and paste this. Between my spelling and Excel, it's a little tricky sometimes. But replace that one, and you see that it just turned organization 15 to 15. I can hit replace all, and you see that it went through 513 and made replacements. So that's something I would have spent a good part of half an hour fixing if I had to do it manually, but I was able to do it with just that one command. All right. The other thing that I wanted to go over was formatting. So formatting's pretty cool. That really tells Excel the data that you're using is the data that it is. So it will make something a number. It'll make it a date. For example, if I go here to right click and click format cells, it already knows it's a date. But let's say I want to have the day of the week there with it. I can click right there, and now it knows what day of the week it is. So let's say I just wanted format cells, and I wanted to I don't really care about the year. I'm just going to have the day and the month. So you can sort of make that however you want to make it. The other thing you can do, you can make these numbers. I'll show you a little bit more formatting when we go along, but you can make these numbers percentages. You can make them dollars. Let's for this, let's just say that this is a dollar. We can call it a currency. This is not really a dollar. We're just going to do this as an example. And so now it turned that whole number into a dollar amount, and get you your dollar sign in front of it. So, but turn that back into general, because that's really its purpose for this. Okay, perfect. Okay, so now we're going to do some formulas. I'm going to switch over to our math tutoring, and I'm going to zoom this in as much as I can, but that's going to make us have to scroll a little bit. I've got a lot of data on this slide, so let's take a tour of this spreadsheet real quick. So I have some of the things that I'm tracking are the student names, what grade they're in, their math teacher's last name, the tutor who's doing the tutoring for us, what middle school they went to, their last year's math grade, their most recent math grade, last year's English, most recent English, and then social studies for both of those, and science. So, and again, this is all made up data. I actually use ChatGPT to help me make up this data, but these are real middle schools in the area. But I just want to make sure we're clear. This is all these names are completely made up. So, and the grades are as well. So that's just to help us go through this. So what we're going to do, so really back to our questions, we want to say, hey, does this tutoring really help us with our improved math grades or not? So I'd come over here. I went ahead and labeled these so that I knew that we're there. So the first thing I can do to figure that out is if I just want to know, like I don't want to put anything in there, I just want to know. One of the cool things about Excel is if you click on a column down here at the bottom, it'll tell you what the average is. It'll tell you how many's in there, and it'll give you a sum. For our purposes, the sum doesn't really matter very much. The count does. You know, we have 200 records here. That's great. And then the average is 68.18. That's good to know, right? And so then I can click here and say, oh man, my average went up a couple of points. It's 75 here. So that's great. But if I want to have that documented, all I have to do is just put in the formula. And this is a formula that's been around in Excel forever. I'm sure that this one is one that hasn't changed. I just click on it and click tab, and then I can click on the column, and it'll average the whole column. And you see it gave us the same number, 68.18, that we had on the other one. So I can do the same thing, average. I want to do column G. And believe it or not, I can copy these. I think this is going to go to H. Yep. So the last year's English and I. So that's perfect. Just copying those over because of where they are in relation to each other on the spreadsheet. They actually copy right over, and Excel knows what I'm talking about. It's always good practice to make sure when you copy something over to go ahead and click on it. And where I'm looking at is up here in this formula. I'm saying, okay, it wants H. I know H is English. That's perfect. So, but Excel will, as long as everything's in relation to each other, the same number of cells over, it's pretty smart about knowing what you're thinking about. So, but again, the best practice is to always check just to make sure that when you copied some formula over from one to another, that you that it's the right thing. So, oh man, this is great. So I can look at seeing this, that man, this improved by about 7 points. This one improved by about 6. Boy, that's perfect. But if I want to know exactly what it is, I can go here and I can just subtract the most recent grade from last year's grade. And then I know that it's 7.4%. Another cool thing that I can do, if I wanted to really have a finite amount to know exactly what it is, I can, and maybe it's more appropriate to do it up here. I can add more or less decimal places by doing that. But let's just stick with the 2. All right. And so again, I've already typed in the formula. I don't need to type it in again. What I'm doing is just on my keyboard, I'm going to Control C, which means copy, and then Control V, which means paste. And so now, very quickly, in less than a minute, I was able to determine what the average score was, old score was, what the average new score is, and then the difference between the two. So I know really quickly, over 200 students, I've improved on average 7.4 points in math. Man, that's great. But let's say, so that's an average. That doesn't always, maybe you need, you really need to know what each student's doing individually, particularly as we go to see what schools improve the best and what tutors are working the best. So if I highlight H and I click this insert button, then it's going to put a new column right before that. So, and so now I can do the same thing. I want to do my most recent grade and subtract from that the last year grade. And so if I hit enter, now it told me that this kid improved by 8 points. And that's right. 81 minus 73 is 8. So do I have to do that for every cell? No. What I do, they have this really great little black dot here in the corner. If I double click on that, then it copies down everything. So let's go ahead and do that for our for all of our other grades. So again, it knows what formula I'm looking for because all this is really doing is saying, hey, subtract 2 to the left of this square of this cell from 1 to the left of this square from that cell. So it's going to do the same thing. I can verify that by saying it's saying J2. Yep, that's right. I2. Yep, that's right. Then I can copy this down. Perfect. I'm going to do it for the last 2 here. I see M2 minus L2. That's what I want. And I see P2 minus O2. Perfect. So I'm going to just copy these down. Down. So now I want to know, this is great, right? I see some kids improve, some kids didn't. And that's going to happen. I see some kids improve by a lot, some kids improve by a little. So
Mike,
how can I? Yeah.
We had just one quick request to see that black dot again and how that
Yeah,
works.
yeah.
One more
For
time.
sure. So when you just highlight in the cell, the black dot is right there in the corner. When you know you're on it, it turns that plus mark from sort of a white plus mark to an outline to a black plus mark. I hope everybody can see that. But it's just this dot right here in the very corner, the lower right-hand corner of that. All right, so now I want to know sort of at what rate people improved or didn't improve, right? So I can do that with that same cool functionality called conditional formatting. So I click on conditional format, highlight cells rules, and I want to say less than. So the first thing I want to do is know who had a negative grade. So whose math grade actually got worse rather than getting better. And then I want to fill that in with red. And then, so what I'm going to do is say if it's less than 0. If it's less than 0, then it's a negative number. Okay. So I want to also know who improved who stayed the same and who only improved by 4 points between those 2 marks, right? So I can say between, and I want to say between -1, which would be 0, and 5. So anything, and so I'm saying one number on either side of it. So anything between 0 and 4, I want to know those. And I want to mark that as yellow, right? They're doing pretty good, but not great. So perfect. Okay. And then I want to know anybody highlight cells and then greater than, And then now I'm able to say anything greater than 4, which is going to be 5 and above, I want to turn green. So now very quickly, I've identified everybody who has been didn't do quite as well as we wanted, did pretty good, but there's still room for improvement, and those that did great. And the other thing I can do here is if I turn on my filters, I can filter that down to those students. So that's really cool. So you can filter by color. If I just wanted to see the ones that needed a little bit more work, now I've got that. So that's great. All right. Let me just make sure I'm looking at my notes. I'm sorry. I just want to make sure I covered everything I want to talk about. All right. So the next thing I wanted to do the tutors column. So here, this is something that we run into a lot with data, is like, particularly when folks manually enter in data. You see that here for on my city column, it says Huntersville, it says CLT. I know that's Charlotte, right? But that's not, the computer doesn't know that means Charlotte. I see Charlotte, I see Huntersville, I see maybe a few misspellings and things like that. So there's a couple of ways. There's a way that I can just see which ones those are. So if I go here to filter, and then if I uncheck the ones, see, it's Matthew, Charlotte, and Huntersville. If I just uncheck the ones that are spelled right and not abbreviated, that leaves me with a list of ones that aren't correct, right? And so now I can go in and here manually type this, but I don't want to do that. I want to make Excel do the work for me. So I'm gonna highlight this column, and I'm gonna go to replace again, and then I want to replace CLT with Charlotte. Place all, and you see that changed 3. I see that I don't have CLT listed there anymore, and so I want to do the same thing with, it looks like CHARLOE was done there. Place all, okay. And so now I can come back here and do my filter again to make things a little easier for me. So now I'm just down to the Huntersville and Matthews location. So I'm going to run through these real quick, replace those. And I'm not going to bore you by going through to fix all of those, but that's how you would do that. And so that makes it really quick, so that when you when you have data that's just not quite right. And so what we're eventually going to do is want to compile these so that we know which cities people are from and things like that. They're all the same. I just glanced at the clock. I see I'm going a little slower than I thought I would. So I'm going to speed up so we have some time for some questions. One other thing I wanted to show you with the students, if you go over here at the students, you can see their schools. And what I built here is a drop down. So this is another way to sort of take care of that problem where where people abbreviate or misspell or whatever. You can actually build yourself a drop down. So you see I have this drop down right here that will only let me put in one of these choices. And how I did that was I wrote everything out on this tab that I wanted to be a choice. I wrote it over here, and then when on this cell, I went to my data section, and in data validation, I said it has to be from a list, and I told it where that list is. Drop down on the drop down sheet between A2 and A10. So now it knows the look. And so if I wanted to build a new one, I can just add it to that list and make sure it's looking at the next cell down, and then it's good to go. Okay, so let's go back to our food. There are just a couple more things to show you. And we'll go back to our food log. And I want to know what day of the week each volunteer came in, right? And I showed you that a minute ago that I can add it to that. But let's say I wanted it in a different cell. So I can actually put in this formula right here. And I think this is a formula that stays pretty consistent through all versions of Excel as well. But this formula, I'm gonna paste it in. And so it's saying, look at A2 and just tell me the day of the week. That DDDD, Excel knows that's the code for spelling out the day of the week. Again, I can do my drop down, and that is that. And so now I know what day of the week each of these folks came in. Oh, I see, and I made a common mistake that we'll do in Excel and not being up at the top of the row. And so I can just put that there. Top of the cell. Boom. All right, perfect. Okay, so I've done that. Okay, so another problem that we run into a lot is we have too much data in the cell, right? And so what I mean by that is right here on the name column, I have the first and last name together. Man, that's hard to fix. And if I had to fix that manually, I'd be here all day fixing that, right? So because I know I can just click right there. I know that I had 300 volunteers by looking right here. I see 301, and one of those is the header. So I know in my head, just by clicking on the row, 300 people listed, that would take me forever to fix. But but Excel has a solution to that. It's a little bit complicated, and this is one that I have to look up all the time. And when I say look up, I'm using Google, or ChatGPT is really good about telling you exactly what you want to put in here. So let's examine this code that I put in here. So left, so it's saying take it from the left and find. It's you see the quotation marks and then a blank. It's saying find the space and give me everything to the left of it without the space. That's what that -1 is. So I can do that. And again, drop that down. And then I'm going to do the same thing. And I've got this, I'm just grabbing it from my notes over here. You don't have to see me try to type and talk at the same time. I'm not good at that. So you see, so this is saying take everything from the right and then find the space and give me that. And so now you see that I've been easily able to separate out the first name and the last name so that if I wanted to do something with that, it's easy to do. And now let's say I want to know, sort of the last thing we're going to look at is I want to know how many people from each volunteer group, or what type of group came to each event. I'm sorry, I want to know how many from each type of group is a neighborhood organization, a business, or a religious organization. So I can do that pretty easily. So first of all, I'm going to type this over here so that I know what I'm looking at. So I have neighborhood organization, business, religious organization. And I'm going to use a function we call count if. And then paste that in there. And so that looked at my organizations, and it told me anybody who's listed as a neighborhood organization in column C. Okay, that's great. I counted that up. And then I'm going to copy and paste that here. And then what I want to do is I want to know who is a business. And I just change that to business. I've got to spell business right. All right, so it's 19. And then same thing for religious organization. Since I already had the word organization there, I just need to change neighborhood to religious. Perfect. So now I have 21 19, and 10 of each organization. So now I'm going to flip back over to my my PowerPoint here. We've done that. So today we went over data collection and selection, finding our way around Excel, and some formulas and some different tricks to make Excel work for us. Next week, I look to show you how to link up sheets with VLOOKUP, which is a great tool to be able to, when you have things divided out in different ways. I can pull in in our thing, I can pull in things from different sheets to show us what we have. We're going to look at some pivot tables, which is a really great tool in Excel that can really show you some great things as well, really bring your data to life. And then how to really make that data come alive with some data visualization. So that's what we'll be talking about next week. And now we have time for questions.
Thank you so much, Mike. I know we covered a lot in a short time. We've got some questions in the chat box, which hopefully you're able to click, but I can also read them out to you. We had a few people in the most recent demonstration you just showed who are curious about, is the process you showed recommended over the text to column to split the names? So I think some people were using sort of a different method to try and separate.
Yeah, and there's a couple of different methods you can do. I've always used that one. I think, so what I always say about Excel and just Windows in general is there are a million ways to do things. And so frequently people use the way that they're taught. And I think that's the way I was taught. And maybe I'm old enough to maybe that was the only way to do it back then. And then they came up with something else, maybe what happened. But yeah, so but yeah, absolutely. If you're used to using another formula, use the formula you have. I wouldn't change it, but I just showed you a way to do it for sure. Okay,
so in short, however it gets done, there's not necessarily a better way. There's just multiple options.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And I think in context, there may be in a specific context, there may be a better way to do things for sure.
Okay. We also have well, we have some questions about formulas too. So a couple of them. One person asked that DDD formula you did for the dates. Is that something you just know, or is that searchable in Excel? And a follow-up question similarly was, is there a good cheater site to reference? You know, some people don't know these formulas exist, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. And I'll tell you there are some good cheater, you know, you can definitely Google, there's a couple of ways to do it. One, let me pull back up my Excel spreadsheet. One, you can look up here in the formulas. I think this is maybe the least efficient way to do it, but it's a way that'll tell you. And if you click on date value, it'll tell you a little something about it and what to put in and all of those things. So there's also, if you just Google like Excel formulas, if I'm trying to do something, really in the old days, if I was trying to do something I didn't quite know how to do, I'd Google, like, how do I, a good example of that is our splitting the names. What's the best way to split names if I have first name and last name? And then you'll go to some websites and you'll see that. The new way that I'm really a big fan of is ChatGPT. We'll do that and we'll really tell you, you can even type it in more in like conversationally to be able to say, hey, I have this data in cell in column A, and in column B I have this data and I want to do this with it. And it will tell you, it'll give you a long open-ended or long response, worded response, and then show you the code that you can copy and paste in there. So formulas anymore, and I still have to look up formula. I'm old enough now, I decided I don't need to waste the space in formulas. I reference formulas all the time. There's a few that I do all the time, but there's other ones that I reference all the time. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, it sounds like you also really like, I mean, ChatGPT is such a great example for a resource as well.
Yeah.
Okay, someone also asked, is there a way to extend the conditional format color across a row?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's play with that a little bit. Conditional formatting, highlight cell rules. So let's just say I want to do this. And let's just say if this number is greater than 5. Okay, we can come back in here into the rule. We can manage our rules. Edit rule. And I think I may have to get back to that person. I think there's a way to do it. It's not coming to mind, but there is absolutely a way to do that. I just have to look that up, but I'm sorry, I don't know that off the top of my head. What I can do to get you to come back next week, I'll make that the first thing I address next week, if that works.
All right. Okay, and I think I'm just gonna be conscious of the time. There was another just sort of addition, just referencing, showing everyone like the ribbon to demonstrate like where all the formulas are.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, like I just mentioned, a good way to understand the formula is what each thing you're trying to do is maybe even to look it up. But here are where all the formulas are. So the auto sum, these are the ones used most often. And let's pull these over here, right? Like we'll do this here for column A. So if I wanted to know the average, and so what I have to do, I have to click in here. I have to change this because this right here in the parentheses is what it's referencing. And then I just have to highlight to there. So you have all these min-max links, all of these things, more functions. But the question is, where do I find all of these? You can find them all right here. And if you click on one, you can even find a whole description. Returns a prorated, and this is pretty advanced one, I guess. Returns a prorated linear depreciation of an asset in a period. That's maybe pretty advanced for what we're talking about. But that's the formula that it does. It would do text. And this returns the character specified in the code by your computer. And so if we wanted to do this, we'll insert here. If we just wanted to get a specific character, text, character, and then we want a character 5 or 3 from this, it should return an M for us, but it did. But yeah, so it's looking at, but to answer the question, sorry, I'm getting off track. To answer the questions, right up here in the formula tab is where you would find all of those and look for them. But again, I think the best way to use formulas or figure out the right one you want to use is actually asking Google or ChatGPT exactly what formula you want to use in the specific context that you're doing it.
Okay. Well, I think we've covered all questions except that follow-up one for next week.
Okay.
But thank you, Mike, so much. We had a lot to cover in a short time, and thank you to every person who's joined. We are so glad to have each of you and so grateful for the work that you're doing in our community. I have dropped the survey. We would love to hear your feedback. As Mike was saying, there's so much you can do with Excel, so we would love to be able to know more about what you would like help with and help us formulate webinars for the future. Thank you, everyone, and hope you have a great rest of your day. You'll get a follow-up email on Monday that's got the slides and the recording. You'll be able to access that, and you should get that from Yin Ting when she returns.
Thank you, everybody.
All right.